Hi, I'm Sashwati Sarkar and you're watching The Times of India. The study abroad landscape is changing and fast. Universities are no longer just looking at grades, they're eyeing mindset, ambition, and adaptability. Meanwhile, Indian students from Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities are emerging as a powerful new wave, hungry, hopeful, and ready to cross borders. But are institutions truly prepared? From visa roadblocks and rising scrutiny at US ports to Ireland and New Zealand stepping out of the shadow of backup destinations, there's a lot to unravel. With us today is someone who's at the heart of this transformation. Manisha Zaveri, Joint Managing Director of Career Mosaic, has worked with over 200 global universities and helped shape their South Asia strategies. Today, she joins us to decode trends, bust myths, and offer real talk tips for Indian students dreaming big. Let's dive into the questions right away. Thanks a lot, Manisha, for joining us today for this very crucial conversation. And I'm sure our questions and answers will be an eye opener for study abroad aspirants of India. You worked with 200 plus global universities. Let's flip the lens. What, according to you, do universities want from Indians to students? International universities, I mean, of course, uh, beyond grades and scores.
Okay, interesting question. Thanks. Think there are different destinations that look for different things from any student, be it an Indian student or any other international student. So, and that depends on what are the academic policies and standards of different countries. I think US is one of those countries. America looks at a holistic profile, so it definitely goes beyond grades and test scores to see what is the kind of work that students have done beyond the classroom, traditional setup of the subjects that you take, or the general background that a student has from their school. Undergrad students, I think the holistic profile that they can work on is different factors from, what is the kind of community work they've done, have they written research papers, or have they dwelled into the subjects of their interest beyond academics. Have they done any kind of internships or volunteered anywhere to kind of uh, demonstrate to the universities that they're genuinely interested in the subjects that they're or the topics that they're applying for. And for graduate students, I think academic excellence as well as curiosity towards higher skills. So master's degrees are usually seen as a upskilling yourself, and in order to upskill yourself, what is the background that you have in terms of what did you study and what do you want to go for, what is the path in your career that you're seeking, and a way to demonstrate that, be it academically or be it through work experience. So that is what universities are saying, a clear intent and background that goes beyond the classroom.
Right, right. So, you've been instrumental in shaping South Asia strategies for many universities. How do institutions tweak their messaging and recruitment when they are targeting India versus, say, Vietnam or Nigeria?
Right. That's very tailored actually. Different universities definitely study the markets and tailor their marketing, communication, and everything from brochures to what is spoken to students when university representatives visit these countries are all tailored to the country that the students are from. For example, Indian students are very career outcome and ROI oriented, right? So when international universities come to India, they do focus on what are the career pathways that the university can help a student achieve. What is the support that they offer to students in order to achieve that career pathway? What are the different degrees and different career outcomes that Indian students can have, if they follow a certain university? Nepal, for example, is a cost-sensitive market, so there the messaging is different. It's based on pricing and scholarships and student safety and support. Vietnam is a market which looks for good universities which have traditionally been reputable and offer a stable community in terms of safety for the student, a conducive environment for students who want to look for different universities and different destinations. So Vietnam students look for some kind of connection with that destination in the past. So that's what universities talk about. What is the community that they have? What is the history that the university has? Nigeria, again, scholarships is a big part of their decision making process. So apart from quality education, they're also looking for post study work opportunities. What are those options? What is the university setup? Is it in an urban setup or a rural setup? What are the post study work opportunities? What is the cost of education, and how can universities support the student financially? So it's all different in different parts of the world.
No, I was talking about the basic difference between, say, a country like India and, say, a Vietnam and Nigeria, because the sentiment and aspirations are very different.
Right. Yes, sentiment and aspirations are in a way not too different. I would say that every student is looking for quality education. So universities that have reputable programs, have a history of, accredited universities, ranked and rated universities definitely do well in most of these destinations. And the other thing, as I mentioned, is outcomes and ROI. That is also equally important for a majority of the major student markets that students go to study at these destinations.
You just mentioned that in India, students are very, very ROI focused. Do you, in your experience, do you see students from all countries are as ROI focused as Indian students are, or there's also a group of there are also countries where students aim knowledge seeking more than ROI.
The students from India are both knowledge seeking as well as ROI focused when it comes to, I'm talking about United States, when it comes to US. Um, However, all the other destinations that offer high quality education, if they are coupled with post study work opportunities where the students can achieve some amount of ROI, those are the ones that end up doing well. So, whether it is Indian students or the markets that you mentioned, Vietnamese and Nigerian students, education quality works well if backed by ROI. If you're only offering excellent education, but there is no ROI, the majority of students are, in any case, excellent universities means higher scrutiny, higher quality of students. The general mass of students don't usually make it to the top universities. But if you're looking at a mid level entire segment of universities, then quality and ROI are both equally important to South Asian students, be it any country of South Asia.
So there's a quiet revolution happening in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Do you think the US and Canadian universities are prepared to handle this first gen, high aspiration, small town students?
Um, I think the tier two and tier three cities of India, where a lot of students are coming from, this is a trend that has been in since a few years now. It has
Yes,
been
a couple of
gradually
years. Yeah.
increasing. And so American and Canadian universities have seen students over the last several years in smaller numbers coming from these destinations. And yes, they have tailored their responses and their support systems to ensure that students from smaller sectors and smaller segments of the country are well supported in terms of mental health, or in terms of even cultural immersion, to make sure that they are well settled. Even pre-departure sessions, which are offered by universities, are tailored to the very basics of how do you get off a flight and what do you do once you are off that flight, with the assumption that these students may not have traveled abroad ever. Being first gen, there is a high possibility. So yes, universities are definitely tailoring their pre-departure and arrival support, and even throughout the study, the support systems that are built are definitely built to make sure that students from all segments, especially the tier 2 and 3, are well supported.
Right, right. So in recent times, there has been increased scrutiny at US entry, ports of entry, necessitating students to be thoroughly prepared with documentation. Could you elaborate on the specific challenges students are currently facing during the visa and entry process? What prospective steps can they take to navigate these hurdles effectively?
Great. Yes. Yes, there is an increased scrutiny, and the scrutiny is on couple of different parameters. One of them, very important, is intent. What is the intention of the student when going for visa, when applying abroad, and how well is the student able to articulate this intent when he or she is standing in front of the visa officer. Unfortunately, sometimes the intent is correct, but the student may be nervous or lack confidence, and that ends up in having a rejection. So, to answer the second part of your question, in what is the preparedness, what can they do to mitigate such issues, is prepare well and be genuine and honest about your intent from the very get go, not just at the time of the visa application, but from the very get go. When you're applying to study abroad, be sure about what are you studying, why are you applying, what is the university that you're going to, why have you chosen this university. It is imperative, whether or not there is a scrutiny as rigid as in recent times, it is imperative that students are well aware and honest about all of these factors and are able to articulate clearly. There are a lot of different ways in which students can prepare. We, for example, conduct pre-departure sessions for our students and visa training sessions, in to build confidence basically on, and not to blank out or be nervous. The other thing is tightened documentation to make sure that the students have the right kind of documentation when they travel or when they are at the port of entry, be it university documents or your personal documents or your financial documents. It is important to carry the right set of documents and have an understanding of what is the scrutiny that's going to happen at the port of entry, or even before that at the time of visa, and be prepared for that. So it is a scrutiny, yes, but you need to be well prepared. You need to have the right kind of documentation, and intent has to be clear, genuine, and honest. That's most important.
As you rightly mentioned, students may be actually, their intent may be right, but they may not be able to articulate their intent in the right manner. So communication skills are also very important, and communication without any hesitation or nervousness. How do you train? How do you mentor your students for this part of the hurdle?
Right. I think one of the biggest proof of that, the fact that you are able to speak English clearly and articulately, is through proof to your language scores, right? We particularly work closely with universities that require language scores to be submitted in order to be admitted to the university. From our part of the world, South Asia, this is an English speaking part of the world, right? And so the assumption is that students will be able to speak in English. Now, in order to make sure that they are confident and don't blank out and are not nervous in front of a visa officer, there are certain questions which are very logical and very obvious on what does the scrutiny involve. And if a student can articulate that and practice that over and over again with the counselor, there are even AI backed tools and apps which are available that students can use to practice, right? And these are verbal apps. Like, you speak to the app will give you feedback. So we use all kinds of different tools to help students and their counselors prepare for plausible questions based on the student's own journey. What is the student coming from? What kind of background? Where are they going to go? And what is the background, financially, family background of the student, even the career and the intent of education.
Right, right. So, if you had to share three real life tips to students aiming, say, Melbourne, Toronto, or Stanford, what would they be?
Okay, so that means the student is aiming for some of the top
Top
universities
notch.
of the
Yeah,
world,
yeah, top
right?
notch.
Yeah. So I think for the top-notch university, if whether you're looking for an undergrad opportunity or a graduate opportunity, the preparedness starts way in advance, like couple of years in advance. It doesn't start when you apply. So for an undergrad student, the preparedness starts somewhere around ninth grade. And for a graduate applicant who's going for a master's program, the preparedness starts from the time that you enroll in your bachelor's degree, wherever in the world you're studying your bachelor's degree,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So one is prepare early. Second is academic excellence, right? You have to show that you were in an academically rigorous program and you were able to achieve the right kind of grades in that program. So academic excellence is definitely important. And third and most important is that universities of the world who are not looking at people who are who are looking to just study the what the matter of facts are, right? So innovation is the generation that we are in, and creative thinking is the age that we are in. So innovation and creative thinking in any field, be it humanities, be it technology, be it management, but to show that you are an innovative creative person in the way your mindset, in the work that you've done, in the academics that you've done, in whatever profile that you've built, is very important to do and project both. So once you have this thing, the alignment to the top universities can start happening, and then you can start checking the boxes one by one.
Ireland, is quietly climbing the charts for Indian students with the booming tech sector, with lucrative post-study work visas, and almost a lack of Indian students calling it home. Are you seeing Ireland becoming more of a mainstream study abroad destination for Indians rather than a backup? And if yes, what should students consider or factor in before jumping into this decision of choosing Ireland as their, uh, primary study abroad destination?
Right. Yes, you're right. Ireland is definitely one of the top study abroad destinations beyond the 4 or 5 traditional destinations that students have always gone to from India. Um, the fact that it is considered the Silicon Valley of Europe, with all of the tech giants which are present in Ireland, definitely help. It has a booming corporate industry ecosystem, so students do end up having a good backup as far as their post study work opportunities are concerned. Universities in Ireland, there are about 22 state supported and 7 big state universities. So, all of these universities, with the quality of education and the corporate work opportunity ecosystem that they operate in, are a great, great opportunity for students looking to study, especially technology, right? All kinds of tech fields are very popular. Indian students, in any case, are very STEM oriented community. So for STEM programs, Ireland is seen as a great option. There are students who are going, but one needs to bear in mind two things. One is, what is the capacity of the country overall? Because India has a huge student market and a big student mobility, outbound student mobility that happens. So while the students are definitely going and they are interested in Ireland, is a very welcoming country, safe country. They have excellent cultural immersion programs and support system. It's a culturally open country for having Indian students. 100,000 Indian students. Indians already call it home, as you said. It's important to understand that what is the capacity of a country of that size, and what is the inflow that they can take. As of now, things are hunky dory. Close to 75,000 students, currently pursuing, and it's very much has a capacity to take many more. But in order to be cautious, I would say again, have Ireland as an option where education is the prerogative. Don't see every country, big or small, with the immigration motive, right? So in Ireland, an undergrad or a graduate student can spend up to 12 to 24 months, working after they finish their graduation. But every country should be seen as an education destination. And in that context, Ireland is a great option and should not be seen as a backup, should be seen as a good option to go to.
Great insight. Great insight. This was really very, very crucial because, for every emerging study abroad destination, you know, we have the tendency to jump into, a conclusion and then take a decision. The factor that you mentioned is very important for students to know before making a final call. So we're seeing a lot. We're seeing a lot of rise in non-traditional student profiles. Like there'll be gap years, career switches, online credentials. Do you think admissions teams are evolving fast enough to evaluate these candidates fairly?
Yeah, well, the answer is yes and no. You're right. That
Okay.
students are, yeah, yeah. I think at undergrad level, it's pretty streamlined. It's pretty straightforward. You finish your high school and then you may take a gap year. You have to prove what you did in your gap year and apply if at all there is a gap year. But for graduate students, yes, there are a lot of, these other qualifications, whether it is gap years or you had a study abroad, um, you know, at one of your bachelor degree semesters, or if you've taken an online program. So some universities and some countries are very well positioned to understand and make use of stitch all of those together in building your background profile and giving you admission. And there are some universities that don't really consider too many of these other things and only look for traditional qualifications. So it entirely depends on which country is your ultimate goal if you're looking for master's degrees abroad, and then plan accordingly whether or not to have any of these additional qualifications or to go in for or to delve into them and do them anyways, whether or not they are given credit for. So it's a matter of whether you're given any leeway, any credit for having all of these additional qualifications.
Okay, understood. So, Manisha, thanks a lot for your time and for your insights. I'm sure we will be, you know, having more such sessions with you.
Thank you so much.